Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and welcome you all to this first of its kind of show at Sreeshti called Ink and Identity, a literary encounter with none other than the children's best-selling author Shantani Dasgupta, who's joining us from New York. And I know we have lots of questions for her and lots of things we want to find out about her recent releases. So I just want to do a little bit of introduction to her before I pass it over for her to her to speak. Shantani wears multiple hats, and it's fascinating how she kind of manages to mingle it all and do it all together. So she's a faculty member in the master's program in narrative medicine, the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Race, and the Institute for Comparative Literature and Society at Columbia University. She is originally trained in pediatrics and public health and has numerous writings in medical journals. And she is also best known as a best-selling children's author at New York Times. So Shantani, without further ado, I would like you to describe yourself to our young audience today and inspiring us from there.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you, Sreeshti, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for making this possible. I'm so delighted that we're not just together on Zoom, but we're also kind of streaming on YouTube, so lots of people can have access to this. It's really a pleasure to be here today. So, as you heard, I am a medical doctor, but a pediatrician. Um, which means I'm a doctor for children. So when I was in the clinic room, I was taking care of kind of the bodies and minds, right? The healthy bodies and minds of young people. In a classroom, I take care of people's intellectual health. And I feel like being a children's author is just an extension of that same work, even though it sounds like it's a lot of careers. I feel like as a children's author, I am really taking care of people's not just intellectual, but their imaginative health, because books are a place where we can really exercise our imaginative muscles and we can imagine people whose lives are really different than our own. We can also use books as a mirror to see people's lives who may have similarities to us. And I'll be talking a bit about this as I talk about my books. So because we're on Zoom, I can't see everyone's faces, but if there are young people um, who feel comfortable putting their faces on the camera, that would be great. What I can also do is like ask for hands at different times. But if there are young people who are on the Zoom who want to maybe can I hear them, or is it better that they put their ages and names in the chat? Sophia, is there a better way to do it?
I think they're going to put their questions and introduce themselves in the chat. And then
Fantastic. So if people can maybe even just write, you know, your name, your age, and you can even just leave it at that for now. Then I'll have a sense of how old people are. Because what I'll do is, depending on how old everyone is, the young people, the parents don't need to reveal any ages, the young people, then I might change a little bit what I'm talking about. It'll give me a sense of who's here. Yeah. Fantastic. Hi, Rajdeep. You're 11. Great. So yeah, and maybe even what grade you're going into. That would be great. Because then if I know we have lots of fifth graders, that's one sort of thing versus lots of sixth graders. Okay. Hi, Yishen. Okay, everyone keep putting your names in the chat. And what I will do is actually ask for my slides to be put up. And what I'll do is I will show you some of my books and the other thing. So young people on the Zoom, this is going to be interactive, even though we're on a Zoom. Going into seventh, perfect, Rajdeep. I might ask for hands as well. Do people know how to do the hands function on the Zoom? If you're a young person, if you look at the bottom, there should be a little way for you to, do a reaction. So And maybe we can just do slide view or presenter view for the slides so people can see the books. Great, thank you, Rishan. I can see your hand. Great. Okay, Rick is a rising sophomore. Okay, Devakshi is a rising seventh grader. Okay, so we have a nice range here. Welcome, everyone. So what I will do now is tell you a little bit about my first three series. So let's see, hands in the chat. Who likes fantasy books? Who likes fantasy books? Hi, Udima, rising freshman. Fantasy books, fantastic. So some examples of some fantasy books. So when I'm in an audience at a school, I'll often say, okay, somebody shout out your favorite fantasy book. But I think because we're on Zoom, what I'll do is I'll just, throw out some examples myself. Percy Jackson is a great fantasy series, right? That lots of people read. Artemis Fowl is a fantasy series that my kids liked. So there are more now fantasy series based in other non-Western contexts and cultures. Hi, Ridhima. But when I was beginning to write, there really wasn't as much. And so that's part of how my journey began. Who likes, before I tell you about these books, let me do two more questions about book types. Who likes adventure books? Could we see hands maybe? All right, we have Radzi who likes adventure books. All right, adventure books, adventure books. Excellent. So sometimes fantasy and adventure go together, right? Like in the Percy Jackson or Harry Potter books, and like in my books. Sometimes you can see adventure books that are set in a contemporary world, in a real world. And so sometimes they go together, sometimes they don't. So the Great Green Heist, or even Spy School, or City Spies, those might be adventure books that are a bit more realistic, not as fantastic. But like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, this first three series I'm going to tell you about are both adventure and fantasy books. Okay, so one last show of hands. I'm looking at my Zoom here. Who here has either they have their own siblings at home, brothers and sisters, or they like books with brothers and sisters in them? All right, we have some hands. All right. So here's a surprise that maybe even some of the parents on here who know me may know. I do not have any brothers and sisters. So I grew up, my parents, like many people's parents who are on this Zoom, came from Kolkata, came from India to the US. They first came to Ohio and then New Jersey at a time when there weren't as many people, as big of an immigrant community as we have now. And I had to kind of go through that without brothers and sisters, but I had the people in my community who were like my brothers and sisters. But therefore, I always was really fascinated with brothers and sisters and siblings. And I have two children. And so the last fantasy series I'm going to tell you about that was recently came out actually stars a brother and a sister, twins. My kids aren't twins. They look like twins. They're not twins. But I really am very fascinated with this idea of siblings. So I have my last series is about twins. Okay, so let me just for a couple of minutes. So what I'll do, just so the young people on here know that I'm not going to be talking forever, I will tell you about my various books and I'll show you pictures of them. I'll tell you a little bit about why I started writing. I had other jobs. Why would you start writing? Is often a question. And, I told you a little bit about how I think of my jobs as interconnected, but I'll also tell you how it began. And then I might just introduce you. Let's see. I might quickly introduce you to some of my YAs, my young adult books, since there's somebody who is going into their sophomore year of high school. But mostly I will just focus on my middle grade books. And I'll tell you about a book that I have upcoming, and then we'll take some questions. And then at the very end, maybe what we can do is watch a little book trailer that was made for my first book. Does that sound okay? Everyone good? All right. So it's about 10:14. Let me take maybe like 20 minutes to tell you a little bit about some of my books. Oh, Rising Junior also. Okay. So we will do a little bit of a focus on the YA books as well. So this is, and when I say middle grade and YA, just so that people know what those differences are, children's books encompass a wide range. So we have picture books, which everyone knows what those are, right? The big kind of board books that you read with your families. There's chapter books. So you might think of something like The Magic Treehouse as a chapter book. Once you get past that, once you get past that second, third grade level, you're going to middle grade books. That's kind of the classic Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Kiranmala age. And then YA books are more eighth, ninth, and up teenage focused books. So that's the range. This is my first series. My first series, anybody read them or seen them around? I'm just looking at your hands. This is the Kiranmala and the Kingdom Beyond series. It's a trilogy based on the story of a 12-year-old girl, Kiranmala, who lives in Parsippany, New Jersey, who thinks she's just the ordinary daughter of immigrant parents until it turns out that all of the wacky stories they told her about how she's really an intergalactic princess destined to slay Rakhosh, it turns out all of her parents' stories are true. Because on the morning of her 12th birthday, a drooling Rakhosh storms into her kitchen, starts eating her plates and wrecking her cabinets, and Kiranmala can't find her parents. And it turns out the Rakkush is kind of a portal, and her parents have been transported to this other world, which might sound familiar to you, the Kingdom Beyond 7 Oceans and 13 Rivers. Definitely based on kind of Takumar Juli Bengali folktales. And so Kiranmala has to travel to this other dimension, save her parents, save the universe, save New Jersey. That's the premise of these books. The first book is The Serpent's Secret. It came out in 2018. Then we have Game of Stars, and we have The Chaos Curse. Each of those books are based on Takumar Juli and Tuntunir Boi and other familiar Bengali folktales, but you know, the stories are totally unique. The stories are my own, set in New Jersey, kind of about the immigrant experience, but told through fantasy. So if you look on the back of the books, if you can see the covers, the beautiful covers made by Scholastic and an artist called Vivian Toe, if you look on the back of the books, you see there are monsters eating barcodes, right? There's a Rakkush kind of on the first cover. There's a Rakkushi Rani on the second cover, a Rakkushi Queen on the second cover, and Medusa on the third. And the reason it's Medusa is because in the third book, Bengali folk tales start to intermingle with Greek myths and with Norse myths. Okay, let's go to the second screen. The next slide, please. Yes, perfect. So you saw the Rakushi Rani eating the barcode. Well, her name is Pinky in my books. I decided that Pinky seemed like a great name for, a fierce, fire-breathing Rakushi Rani. So Pinky, in the first series, is an adult. But she was such a fascinating, kind of a terrible and fabulous character that I decided to write her origin story. So this series, there's just two of them, Force of Fire and Crown of Flames, is Pinky's origin story. In the beginning of the stories, Pinky is a fire-breathing Rakkoshi. She goes to the Ghototkoch Academy of Murder and Mayhem, as one does when one is a, Rakkosh in training, obviously made up school by me. And in the first book, she's very selfish. All she wants to do is control her fire. She's causing havoc. She's set fire in her school through this fire vomit situation, which is very embarrassing. And all she wants to do is control her vomit or her fire breathing powers. And then over the course of the books, she actually realizes that her fire is her power. And with great power comes great responsibility. So says Spider-Man's uncle. And so she ends up joining this band of revolutionaries and using her fire-breathing power to help free her kingdom from the evil serpent empire. And so this series is very loosely based on the Indian Revolution, and the Serpent Empire is a very thinly disguised metaphor for the British Empire. So that's this series. And then let's go to the third slide. So this is my most recent fantasy series, also set in the same multiverse. So the same Pokiraj horses, the same flying horses that appear in all the books, appear in this book as well. Some of the kind of evil characters show up in this book as well, but the protagonists are different. The heroes are different. Iya and Kinjal are brother-sister twins. Again, growing up in New Jersey, it starts in an ordinary world when two flying horses come into their backyard and tell them, "We need your help. The kingdom beyond is in trouble." And so they end up flying off to the kingdom beyond with their flying horse pals and their flying horse dog, Thumbs Up. The reason Thumbs Up is a flying horse dog is because she disguises her wings. She looks like she's just an ordinary dog. And when it is needed, her wings get revealed, and she is actually a very tiny flying horse. She just failed at a flying horse school, and so she took on a job as a pet. And they go off on these adventures that are kind of environmentally inspired. In the first book, the chaos monster, the bees are missing, and the kids have to figure out why. In the second book, the poison waves, the Jolpuri, the mermaids, are getting sick because the water is poisoned. And in the third book, the ghost forest. So you all know how Bhoot, they like to live in trees, right? In Bengali stories. So in the third book, these ghosts, they're haunting everyone. They're making nuisance. They're like creating chaos. And the kids assume that the ghosts are the bad guys. Hi, seventh grade, 12. Excellent. So in the third book, they assume that the ghosts are the bad guys. Turns out they actually just need help. Their home forests are being cut down. So, they're actually unhomed and they're desperately in need of help. So the third book really is about kind of thinking through who we think is bad and who we think is good. And they're all kind of environmental adventures. So let's go to the next slide. Just look at my time. Okay, so in addition to those 3 fantasy series, I also have written a biography of Virginia Apgar. So those 3 series I just showed you are from the publisher Scholastic, who's the same publisher who does Clifford and Dogman and Captain Underpants and Harry Potter and various things. The Virginia Apgar books are from Penguin. It's a biography that appeared as part of Chelsea Clinton's She Persisted series about a doctor who started the APGAR score, which is a test we use for all newborn babies. And then I very recently wrote from HarperCollins a Girl Scout book called Anika and the Great Dog Rescue. The story of this book is that the Girl Scouts came to me and they said, "We would like a story about an immigrant daughter, who rescues cats." And I said, "I don't know anything about cats. I don't have a cat. I've never had a cat. Can I write a story about a girl who rescues dogs?" And they said, "Sure." And so that's how Anika and the Great Dog Rescue happened. Let's go to the next slide. I also have 2 books that are, although they are young adult books, they're very appropriate for even like 6th, 7th grade and up. They are both based on books by an adult author, a grown-up famous author named Jane Austen, if you've heard of her. The first book, Debating Darcy, is based on her book Pride and Prejudice, which some of the parents on here might be fans of. I am a big fan of. It's the plot of Pride and Prejudice, which is a story about these 2 people who kind of debate their way into falling in love, but it is set in a high school speech and debate setting. So we have a private school debater and a public school debater, and they meet and they think they hate each other, and then turns out they don't. And the second book, Rosewood, A Midsummer Meet Cute, is a little bit more loosely based on a Jane Austen novel called Sense and Sensibility. It's also set in a high school summer theater camp, a Regency theater camp. So it's Sense and Sensibility meets summer Shakespeare theater. If anyone knows, the Delacorte Theater right now in New York City is showing this very wonderful production of Twelfth Night, which I'm going to try to go see. Anyway, Summer Shakespeare meets kind of PG-13 Bridgerton, if you're familiar with that show. So in this book, Rosewood, a show called Rosewood, which is a Regency show, is casting for multicultural extras. And they might choose some of the kids at the camp. So that's kind of the plot of that book. Next slide. And then I have a book coming out next April. This book is not out yet, but I just wanted to let you know a little bit about it since I'm very excited. It is, again, a middle grade book, so kind of a third, fourth grade and up book. Theft of the Ruby Lotus. Anyone here, let's see a show of hands, know about the Kohinoor diamond and the fact that a lot of the things that we see in Western museums are sometimes not voluntarily given, forcibly taken from places and put on display. Yeah? People have heard of that? Young people, let's see hands. Yeah, people have heard of that. Okay. So I love museums. I've always loved museums. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of what we see in museums are actually cultural treasures from other places that have been forcibly taken in the process of a war or colonialism. And Theft of the Ruby Lotus is about a made up treasure. It's a sword, and I say that this sword is the sword of an Indian revolutionary heroine called Padma Devi, who I just made up. But that's I based her on the Rani of Jhansi, who was a very important figure who like rode into battle with her baby strapped on her back famously. And in my story, that sword is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art right here in New York City. And the ruby from the hilt of that famous sword, the big ruby, has been stolen and no one knows where it is. That's, thieves broke into the Met. And the beginning of the story begins when Ria, who is in the front there in the cap with the stone around her neck, the stone shows up in her house. And she becomes convinced that her mom, who is an art curator at the Met and has been acting kind of funny lately, is actually the person who stole it. And so, in order that her mom not get in trouble, she decides to enlist the help of her best friends, Miracle, who's in the green pants, and Annie, who is in the blue jacket, to return the stone to the Met. And they happen to be having a school sleepover. And so the girls decide to break into the exhibit to return the stone. But then some real thieves show up sliding down on ropes. They meet a mysterious boy named Zakir, who's there in the back. And they kind of go on this adventure to figure out who actually stole the stone and kind of realize all these truths about how art shows up in museums. So that is that book that's coming out soon. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is the part where I tell you why I started writing. So when I was let's say seventh grader, maybe sixth grader, seventh grader, I must have been, in New Jersey. I had just moved from Ohio. It was a long time ago, as you can tell from the terrible fashion in this picture. And I did not have any stories of kids who looked like me. I did not see them on the screen. I did not read them in books. I just didn't see kids who looked like me, period, represented anywhere. And a part of me got the message that maybe somebody who looked like me didn't deserve to be represented. Maybe somebody who looked like me couldn't be a hero, even of my own life. And that is a terrible idea. And I don't want any of you to have it. But I had that idea. I had that feeling. Next slide. The one place where I would see kids who look like me, kind of starring or center stories, where I would go to Kolkata. And this is my Didima, my grandma, and I would hear these amazing stories. And I'm sure that some of the young people may have had a similar experience where, your grandparent, your parent, your uncle, your aunt pulls you together at night with your cousins. Maybe you're sitting under the moshari, maybe the fan is moving, and it's kind of this mysterious place, and they tell you these amazing stories. And sometimes the stories that she told me were stories based on Takumar Chuli. Let's go to the next slide. And in my mind, the Shat Samudra Tarunadir Pare became the kingdom beyond 7 oceans and 13 rivers. And so I decided to set my modern stories in this kind of version of that world. This is a map that someone drew for me for my books. All right, go ahead, next slide. Okay, just a slide of Takumar Chuli. When I go to schools, there are very rarely Bengali kids in the audience, although there are lots of kids from all different backgrounds who have a similar experience, right? And they'll say, oh, my grandma tells me stories or whatever. So I often show this slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as we know, these traditional stories, right, that many of us grew up loving and hearing are filled with evil serpent kings. And so I decided to make, you heard about the serpent empire in one of my series. I decided to make my characters, my books have evil serpent kings. Next slide. They are filled with princes and princesses on flying horses. These are, this is Nilkamal and Kiranmala from my first series on flying horses. So I decided to include that aspect. Next slide. Next. And of course, when I was young, I loved how Rakosh would how mau cow, like make up rhymes and chase people. And it was one of those things where, you were both scared, but also really giggling. Like it was both funny and scary, right? I'm sure people have had that experience. So in English, I had my Rakush say things like, dirty socks and stinky feet, I smell royal human meat. And then they would chase the kids in the book, which of course is I think, a technical problem, a planning problem. If you're going to chase somebody, just chase them. Don't spend time making up meter and rhyme. But sadly, a cross-cultural problem. Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Clearly, Western monsters do the same thing. Make up rhymes before they chase people. So that appears in my books. Next slide. So I started writing my books, when my kids were this age. As you see in the picture, they were kind of setting up hammocks in our living room in the summer and reading books. I think my daughter might even be reading, Harry Potter right there. But they said to me, Ma, there's no kids who look like us. Where are the kids who look like us being heroes and having an adventure? And that's when I started writing, not to publish. I wrote these stories at the first book at the bedside, for my own kids. Next slide. And I wrote my books because of this idea. There is a wonderful, powerful, Pulitzer Prize winning author, grown-up author, the high schoolers may be familiar with, Toni Morrison. And she has this beautiful quote that I always refer to. I wrote my books because of this thing that she said. If there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written, then you must write it. So if there is a book about a family like yours or a kid like you or a community like yours and you cannot find it, you have the responsibility and the power to tell that story, right? I absolutely also love Toni Morrison. So as you all are going to high school and college, definitely pick up her work. Next slide. So, okay, here, let me just take a couple of minutes. Quickly, I'll show you some of the characters in my recent fantasy books. And then maybe I'm not going to spend too much time on the YAs, so I'll skip through some of those, and then we'll go to questions maybe. Okay, so as I said, the Secrets of the Sky series stars brother-sister twins, Kia and Kinjal. Vivian Toe was the illustrator of my first 2 fantasy series, Sundara Tang was the illustrator of this series. So as you hear, even from their names, these are Asian artists, but they're not South Asian artists, and they're certainly not Bengali artists. So I actually got to work in concert with both of them to make sure that my characters looked right, or the representation felt right to me. Next slide. Next. Oh, yeah, there we go. So this series has the two kids, brother sister twins, as well as Thumbs Up the dog. And of course, when I go to schools, I always ask, why is the dog named Thumbs Up? I'm imagining everyone here knows why the dog is named Thumbs Up. I was not allowed to drink a lot of Coke or soda when I was little, but I would go to India, and you know what it's like when you go to Kolkata, then everybody else takes over. So I would go out with my Didi or my mama or whoever, somebody else would take me out shopping or something. And they'd be like, you don't have to tell your parents. Here, have a Thumbs Up. So I'm not saying that you should drink Thumbs Up without telling your parents, but that was a very exciting experience for me. The dog is named Thumbs Up. Next slide. And the dog is based on my own dog. This is my own dog whose name is Kushi, who is 91 pounds now. We're overfeeding him a little bit. But you would think he would be brave. He is not brave. He is afraid of ladybugs. He is afraid of flies. He is afraid of if you do the garbage bag too loudly. So I thought I would write about a dog who is not very brave, but also very loyal. And what would that dog do if their kids were in trouble? They would have to go to their rescue, but they would be very scared about it in the process. Next slide. My dog was not impressed. I thought he would be more excited about me writing him into these books. He was not. Look at his face. Not impressed. Next slide. He was even less impressed when I bought some Halloween wings and tried to make him wear this is just barely balanced on his back. That picture took many tries to get. Next slide. And in the book, Thumbs Up is not a great flyer. Thumbs Up is not really great at much except for loving and being loyal. And in a sense, right, isn't that the power that we really need? To love and be loyal to those we love. Everything else you can kind of make up for. And that's kind of the point of Thumbs Up. Next slide. So yes, as we said, there are Bokhiraj horses. When I go to schools without Bengali kids in them, they're always really intrigued. They're like, oh, that kind of sounds like Pegasus. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure what the origin is, but yeah. So there are Bokhiraj horses. Next slide. And there's a queen of the Bokhiraj, or princess, who shows up, Princess Bokhiraj. Next slide. And there are bhoot. And again, non-Bengali kids are always really amused by Mecho Bhoot and all the various kinds of ghosts that we have. Next slide. There are the mermaids, the Jalpuri. Next slide. The Mecho Bhoots do end up having a fish fight with the kids. A source of great amusement. Next slide. And of course, there is our evil serpent king. He's so evil, in fact, that he shows up in all my series. And he doesn't like to do his own fighting for himself. He has his seven-headed son. Next slide. Do all of his fighting for him. So we see poor Thumbs Up there fighting the seven-headed snake. Next slide. And so here I'm actually going to skip through these slides. That was more about my middle grade books. This is my YA books. So I have always been a fan of this author called Jane Austen, but I'm just going to quickly skim over these. Next slide. Who lived in, the 1700s. And even though she lived so long ago, there are many television programs and plays and adaptations. Next slide. Of her work, from all sorts of things, right? Even Pride and Prejudice and zombies. So people, love her work. And in the same way that I went back to my, Takumar Chuli stories, you can also go back to classic texts like this, but make them your own. Next slide. And of course, you can make them your own in various ways. You can kind of decide who gets to be centered and who gets to be the hero. Next slide. And we can see ourselves in our favorite stories and make them our own. Jane Austen is for everyone, for instance. Next slide. Okay, so here we're almost at the end, and then we'll take some questions. So my kids who looked like this when I started to write, next slide, now look like, they don't even look like this. This is like 2 years old now. Now look like this. So I've been at it a while, and it's been a delight because they are my best and harshest critics. They help me by reading all my books. Next slide. So just to remind you, this series are the Kiran Mala books. This first series about the girl who grows up in Parsippany. Next slide. Pinky, the fire Rakushi, the fire-breathing Rakushi's origin story. The first book is a portal fantasy. We start in the real world and we go to the fantasy world. This story is high fantasy, meaning it's set entirely in a fantasy world. Next slide. This is also a portal. We start in New Jersey and end up in a fantasy world. Next slide. And of course, the Virginia Apgar. Oh, I forgot to put Annika and the Great Dog Rescue as well on this slide. Next. And the YA books. Next. And then Theft of the Ruby Lotus. So those are all my books. That's a little bit about why I write. Why don't we take some questions, and then right at the end, we can watch the 30-second trailer to The Serpent's Secret. That's also really fun. And I'll tell you about what's happening with TV and movies and Kiran Mala. So how are we going to do the questions, Sophia? Are we going to have the young people come on, or
I think, yeah, they can, raise their hands, and then, Shubhajit can maybe unmute them, and then they can ask their questions themselves if they're comfortable, or they can put it in the chat and I can ask on behalf of them, whichever way works. But that was such a fascinating introduction and background about why you write, your recent work on children's literature and young adult fiction, and a lot of things that I'm sure, we are all dying to know more about, and we have lots of questions. But I just have one question, and then I'm going to quickly, turn it over to the younger people, which is that you're not just writing, children's literature and new stuff for the younger generation, but the way you're sending this message about cross-cultural, integration and using Bengali folklore and setting it though in an American setting, right? And in a multi-universe setting, right? Which is fantasy fiction and all of that. So I know you primarily you began writing for your own children, and then you had your own upbringing and, being the children of a child of South Asian immigrant parents from Bengal, how it was like. I just want to know, like, how for a non-Bengali, non-Indian audience is your reading being accepted here? How do you think they react? Because for us growing up, or for many of our kids, they perhaps know Lal Kamal, Nil Kamal, Pokhiraj Kora, Rakosh. A lot of them might have some, idea about these characters, and now they're seeing it played out in their setting, which I feel is absolutely cool. But what about for a non-traditional, non-Indian audience of young readers? How did they accept it, especially, the Kiran Mala series and all like that? And
yeah.
also, I'd like to know in India, if do you have a readership there, young audience, and how do they see it being, in a setting different from exactly, where they are?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So thanks for that, Sophia. That's a great question. So there's 2 seconds of just kind of nerdy background. There's this wonderful scholar called Rudine Sims Bishop, who is a professor emeritus at Ohio State. And she came up with this notion that books are windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So what do I mean by that? Books are mirrors in that they reflect ourselves back to ourselves. They're windows in that they allow us to look into other people's lives. And they're sliding glass doors in that when the glass is clean, we can actually even step into those other lives. I wrote my books thinking they would only be mirrors, meaning I wrote them for my children, hoping that my children, Bengali children, South Asian children, could see themselves centered and as the hero. Turns out they were also windows and sliding glass doors. So an example, I will show up at schools. There are rarely Bengali children, right, at these schools. There might be a few South Asian children. There are kids who are either immigrant kids and they connect on that level. Sometimes I'll have like a gaggle of blonde boys running up to me who like have ostensibly nothing in common with Kiran Mala, right? But they do, because, right, that's what literature is. It makes the particular experience universal. And so they may not know the word Rakhosh. It's a new kind of monster, right? If you can learn about Medusa, you can learn about Rakhosh. It's the same thing. Just a new kind of monster. They are tickled because my books are also very fast paced and funny, and there's demon snot and there's Tuntuni, like my Tuntuni, as opposed to like the original Tuntuni, tells terrible dad jokes and like is always trying to make everybody laugh. And the jokes are horrible but funny in that way, right? They're like bad jokes, but they're funny. And so the kids are running up and they're like, oh my gosh, that bird is so funny, and and the demon snot and this, that. And so I realized that I wasn't just writing these particular stories for particular kids to see themselves. By being so particular, I was actually opening it up to kind of universal storytelling. And that's what universal storytelling is, right? You don't have to look like Hansel and Gretel to appreciate the story of the witch and the woods, right? And you don't have to look like Kiranmala to appreciate that adventure either. It's really fun that in India, my books are available, not just in Kolkata, but I've done talks for like there's a bookstore in Bangalore that I zoomed in and I did a talk for their kids. So it's really fun that they're also seeing them as occurring in a different place, because they're like, oh, this is not set in a familiar setting. It's set in a fantasy world, but also in New Jersey. So it's actually been really wonderful to see how books can function in all these ways.
Wow. So there's a lot of cultural education going on.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah, but without being education, right? It's
being educated,
enmeshed in a story. Yeah.
of course. So we have a series of questions already in the
Okay.
chat box, I see. Um, do you want me to share the first question with you?
Yeah, I mean, I see them as they're popping up, but let me see. Can we see which one came up first? Okay. Oh, here we go.
Better,
Um,
I think.
let's go back. What is the backstory for Thumbs Up in Secrets of the Sky? I mean, sadly and embarrassingly, it was me liking to drink Thumbs Up in Kolkata. I don't know, which is kind of an embarrassing reason. It's kind of like, yeah, my parents didn't let me drink Coke. I liked Thumbs Up. That paper straw, it disintegrates in your mouth. It adds to the flavor. That was it. And then my dog, my very, very afraid dog. And I really wanted to write. My dog is a boy who we named Kushi, which is a whole confusing, gender is universal kind of story. But so Thumbs Up is a girl in the books. And but she is afraid, like Kushi is. She's both loving and very, very afraid. So that's the backstory of Thumbs Up. Are you going to write a new series or a new book? I do have that Theft of the Ruby Lotus coming out next April, but it's available for something called pre-order now, which means you can go to your favorite local bookstore or Amazon or wherever and pre-order the book. And actually, I'm going to be having a couple pre-order campaigns at local bookstores that will ship them to you when they're ready. And I'll be giving away like, not just I'll personalize them and give away bookmarks, but I'll also I'll raffle off like a school visit for people who pre-order or a book club visit. So I'll be posting about the pre-order soon, and I'll send everyone at Sreeshti the information about the pre-orders soon. Let's see. How have you incorporated your past and your life into books, says Debakshi. So yeah, in kind of the ways that I talked about, incorporating my past and my life, I thought that I was writing these very specific stories for 12-year-old me who hadn't seen herself, and for my own kids many years later. And it turns out, if you tell a good story, if you tell a rip-roaring, fantastic story that is fun and funny and, has truths in it for everyone, that people beyond who you think are going to fall in love with them and support them. And so that's been really fun. And so I would say, are there writers in the audience? Any of the young people like to write? Can I see hands? So I would say when you're writing, your first audience is always yourself. Then it's in the editing process that you want to show your story to respected adults, right? Teachers, or even peers, even other people who write in your life. Who thinks that a published author doesn't have to change anything they write and everything I write comes out perfect? Anybody? Please don't think that. Nothing I write comes out perfect. It's all terrible on the first, or not, maybe not terrible, but like not great on the first draft. Just like you have teachers who might encourage you to edit and rewrite, I have an editor, my editor at Scholastic, who I've worked with for many years now, will say, you know what, I'm not sure this part is working, or maybe we could try to change this, or that plot point doesn't make sense, or whatever. And so I do have to rewrite and go back to the drawing board a lot. But that's a really important part of the process also, right? Is to start very specifically to you and then make sure through the editing process that your story is open enough that other people can enter and kind of live through your stories also. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what other questions we have. If you had to be one of your characters for a day, which one would you? That is a great question, Rishan. I mean, it's like asking me for my favorite child or something. It's hard, right? Because you love them all. But maybe secretly Pinky. Pinky's like, she's so bad, and it was so fun writing like a not always good main character. I mean, she like breathes fire on people. She's kind of selfish, but she's also like fabulous and beautiful. And so it was really fun for me to write that character. And so maybe I'd be her for a day, I think. Let's see what other questions we have. Okay, so that is the last question that I have in the chat. Are there other questions before, and then we can show the trailer and then, oh yeah.
So Shantani Shogandha here. Not literally related to your books, but you as an author, you as a mom, and you as a student who grew up when not many people look like you, spoke like you, stuff like that. When you took this journey, you went to the college, you started not only when you were studying, but when you were imparting knowledge to kids, and now when you go to colleges as a parent and have many South Asian and familiar looking, personalities in the campus, how you see the journey, how as a diaspora we have evolved, and where do you see us going, and what do you think we should be doing more, you know, as a community to be very not only regarded as CEOs of IT companies. That's a very very stereotypical, in my opinion, identity. So, otherwise, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, oh, that's a big question. My goodness. I mean, I think that the most we can do is to make room for everyone to kind of authentically live their lives and recognize that authentic, real living of life is going to look really different. So I'm a professor at a university, and a lot of students will come to me who are immigrant kids and first gen kids, and they'll say, actually, one of the most beautiful questions I had was at a school in South Texas. So these weren't South Asian kids; these were mostly Latino kids, Latina kids. And one young girl said to me, "You're an immigrant daughter," and I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'm an immigrant daughter. My parents are immigrants." So I was like, "Okay." She said, "Miss, I have a question. How do you make yourself proud, but also make your family proud?" And I think that that's a kind of universal experience definitely for immigrants, maybe for everyone.
Mhm.
And I think that question, part of it's about there are realities in life, right? You have to support your family, and you have to support your elders, and you have to support your, children if you have them, and your community. But there's also kind of the room for recognizing, how do we get away from kind of a perfect or model minority, or, kind of face saving, looking perfect to the world perspective, and how do we just make room for all of our older people and younger people to kind of live authentically. And whether that's how you choose to live, or who's your partner, or what kind of a career you have, or telling silly jokes and being funny, whatever it is, how do we make room for all of us to live as authentic a life as possible? And so at a simple level,
See,
sometimes people will say, oh, I want to tell stories, but my parents are telling me I have to go into science or something, or I like science and I like stories, something like that. And I often say, don't think of these parts of your education or yourself as separate. You can be all of yourselves at the same time, unapologetically. And that can mean your identity, but it can also be something as simple as you could be a scientist who tells stories and a storyteller who understands science. And those things are really important to one another, in fact. And I would argue that if you don't know how to tell stories, you're not going to be as good of a scientist, and vice versa. Right? And so I often tell, the students who come to me, don't think of yourself as living this. When I was growing up, I was like this person on the weekend and this person in the week. And that's a very fractured and difficult way to live your life. Like, be all of yourself unapologetically all the time. And if there are going to be people who are naysayers and haters out there, there are just as many people who are going to be supportive in our community, but also in other communities. Like, I would say, as a South Asian community, we need to kind of make alliances and support other communities of color, other immigrant communities, and recognize that, if we rise, we rise together, sort of a thing.
I think the best word that sums up is the authentic self you bring, and there is no different self from Monday to Friday and a different self. Thank you very much. It's so clear. And one more thing, something which fascinates about me about you is your narrative medicine profession, the storytelling. I always tell people how you explain that, so this infection became because you were working in the garden. Remember the talk show you did? So would you like to very shortly to tell our children what narrative medicine is and how storytelling works in the medical field as well?
Yeah, of course. So really quickly, because I do want to show you the video right at the end, but it's only 30 seconds, so it won't take very long. So very quickly, if we human beings are storied creatures, if we understand ourselves through story, and we understand each other through story, then at moments of life's change, be that a graduation or, move, maybe you move houses, or something like an illness or a disability or a trauma, we need stories more than ever. And so what I tell the doctors I train is that it's not magic. In the same way that you have to be trained to read an X-ray, you have to be trained to read or understand somebody else's story. It's the most critical part of healing. And sometimes, even when there isn't medicine for something, showing up and listening to somebody's story is kind of medicine enough. It's a very powerful medicine. So that's the idea of narrative medicine. And that's why, to me, being a doctor and being a storyteller are so connected. It's kind of the same work for me. And so really quickly, I do want to show you all the video, the Kiran Mala video, because even though there's no news to share yet, we are in the process, myself, some producers, a writer, Frida Pinto, who's the actress who was in Slumdog Millionaire, her production company. We are in the process of trying to get the Kiranmala books to an animated TV series. So we're in the process. And so even though the images you're about to see aren't the same thing, this is just a trailer that Scholastic made for me. It might give you a feel of hopefully someday what a Kiranmala TV show might look like. So maybe we could just show the 30-second video and then round it out. Oh, the sound. We just need the sound for the video. Oh no. Can you all hear the sound? No, right? Maybe we need to re-show it with the sound, or else, you know what, if we can't, if for some reason the sound is not working, then it's on YouTube, so people can go themselves and watch it. Should we try it one more time and see if the sound works? Let's see. If not, it's the book trailer for The Serpent's Secret, and it is on YouTube from Scholastic. So maybe people can go and watch it there. And then let's see if it works. And the last thing I will say is I do, as an author, one of the best parts of being an author is doing school visits. So I do visit schools, I do library and bookstore events. So, keep an eye out if you want to attend something. If you want me to come to your school, let your teachers know. They will often have kind of mechanisms to get authors, local authors particularly, to come. The next event, public event I'm doing, I think is at the Chappaqua Book Festival in September 27th up in Chappaqua, New York. It's a beautiful outdoor, huge book festival with many, many authors. So I'll be there signing books. Let's see. The trailer's not working, no? Ah, sad. No, I think the sound is not working. That's okay. So parents, just with your parents' permission, you can go and watch the Serpent's Secret book trailer, which is on YouTube. It's only 30 seconds. It's very short. So you'll get a sense of the book and what it might look like visually. So thank
Shantanu, we
you.
will share the link of that video
Perfect.
in the members group, so whoever attended today will be able to see just by clicking in there. We'll make sure we
Perfect. So thank you all so much for coming today and having me come and speak. It's such a delight. I mean, who would have thought that this would be where I was back in the day when I was just writing this at the bedside for my kids. It's a huge honor. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Shantani. The hour just flew, and there was so much that we learned from you today. So much cool, fun stuff, and I'm sure you inspired some of our younger audience, to write and be their true, authentic selves, no matter what. And that's important in so many different levels, right? So we look forward to reading more of your books. We look forward to watching this TV series once it comes out, the movie show. So best of luck for that, and thank you, and hope to have you again at Srishti.
I would love to. And so yeah, Theft of the Ruby Lotus comes out in April. So if anyone would like to come, I'll be doing, I'm sure, events in the area. So so come on by, or I'd love to come back. That would be great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.